Welcome to this session of the Cyber Leaders Exchange. My guest today is Juliana Vida, the Group Vice President and Chief Strategy Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Juliana, always great to catch up with you. Thanks for taking the time.
Likewise, Jason. Thank you.
As we continue our session today around supply chain and supply chain risk management, Juliana, one of the things I hear time and again is resiliency, and that's a key word that comes up across all agencies. I had a very interesting conversation just recently with a chief risk officer, and he talked about resiliency, and cyber resiliency was a big piece of that effort. So that's where I'm going to start with. We've seen the National Cybersecurity Strategy Implementation Plan come out. We're about 6 or 8 months into it. Where does cyber resiliency fit in terms of the NCSIP? Wow, it's a mouthful plan.
Well, I'll just start with from the beginning, like in a broad umbrella description about resilience and how we think about it at Splunk. Like you said, you're going to hear it from people in different business units, different ways people think about resilience. You know, from a chief risk officer might be thinking about it differently from a company like Splunk. But really, simply put, it's being able to, if you can't see threats coming at you, at least when they hit you, you can fight through them, and then be able to execute your mission and then figure out how to prevent it from happening again. So that's kind of the basic underpinning of resilience. Whether that's in a cyber context or it's in a supply chain context, it's all about fighting hurt and being able to live to see another day, you know, if you want to use a basic DoD example. And so from in terms of the NCSIP, the most recent implementation plan, that theme of resilience is just built in as a concept for agencies to think about as they look at the implementation plan and figure out where they should prioritize their efforts. So the implementation plan is more of a practical guide to execute on the initial strategy. And that theme of resilience that weaves through it should just be kind of a North Star, a guiding light for agencies to be thinking, this isn't just about checking the box today to be safe and secure, but it's about creating an environment where we're less likely to have to face some kind of intrusion in the future. But if we do, we can still fight through it.
I appreciated the analogy of fighting hurt and be able to live another day. I think when it comes to cyber and the way the threats keep changing, the way they keep getting worse, and with the advancement of bad actors, the resiliency is I think it's clear why that's getting so much attention. What are you starting to see around that idea of resiliency? Agencies, I think, understand it better today than they did a year ago, 5 years ago, but what are you seeing as how they're understanding it?
Well, one thing I always like to talk about in terms of any technology advancement or acceleration of, you know, tech being used for good or for bad is to remind leaders and remind people really that all of these issues are about 3 central themes: people, process, and technology. And so technology is going to continue to advance. It's going to continue to get better, but it's still going to be out of reach for a lot of agencies, at least in the near term. But the people and process pieces are just as important to have in place so that when you are able to adopt a new technology or enhance the technology that you have, you're not playing catch up with, oh my gosh, we don't have the workforce to use it. Or, oh, we have the workforce and the tool, but we don't know how people are going to talk to each other, how they're going to work across an agency. So what I think we're seeing, well, when I talk to customers or hear people talk out in the public sphere, is that there's more of an awareness of course, the workforce piece. You know, we can't have a conversation without talking about the lack of qualified and skilled workers in tech and cyber. So for agencies who can't necessarily get the tech they need right now, the focus on the people and process is a great way for them to prepare the battlefield, another DoD kind of example, prepare for the day that they do have their wish list of the best technology, the best in breed, so that they can be successful using the technology. It's like give an iPhone to a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old and all they want to do is play the game on it because they don't know how to use all the other stuff. That's a simplified example, but it's not that far-fetched from some of the advanced tech that agencies have in their environment, but they have very few people who are skilled in knowing how to use it. So to kind of circle back, it's a people, process, technology theme that I am seeing more agency leaders talk about and invest in, and that it's going to make all the difference when they finally get that triad in place with all three pieces.
The good news, I think, is money is coming is a strong word, but people are thinking about money. We heard from Chris DeRusha, the Federal Chief Information Security Officer, yesterday during the Cyber Leaders Exchange, and he talked about for the first time they have data and actually a number of how much money is going into zero trust, which is about $5.8 billion overall. Now, that's out of, I think, if I remember quickly, about an $18 to $20 billion overall cyber budget. So about a third is really looking at zero trust. And we'll get into zero trust in a little bit, but I think part of this idea of resiliency is built into this idea of zero trust. So at least the money is being asked for. They realize they need more money, which is constant. The people side, as you said, we talk about that a lot. So maybe let's dig into the process side, because there are things they can do within their process to really promote this idea of resiliency. And I think one of the things we can talk about is obviously better monitoring, better automation, better observability. Talk a little bit about some of those process changes that agencies maybe don't need a lot of money to take advantage of.
Yeah, I would say that even without regard to any specific technology or capability, like you said, automation or orchestration, just getting an agency to be more trusting inside of its own self and with other agencies is a process change that really shouldn't be that hard to do. It's just that years of, oh, we've always done it this way, or we never trusted that agency before, so we still shouldn't. Those kind of barriers that are in place for just basic sharing of best practices and sharing of what worked and what didn't work. Breaking down those barriers, I think, is probably one of the single most effective process changes that agencies can do. And really, that's just about people getting over themselves often and changing their mindset. The world today is not the world 10 years ago. It's not the world 5 years ago. And I mean, that's kind of a, well, no kidding statement, but really, when you look inside government agencies who are traditionally very hierarchical and very stovepiped, that is not the world today. We only have to look at global companies or 24-hour news cycle to see that everything kind of just meshes together. And that has to include internal agency communications, training, policies, and politics. The quicker that agencies can get rid of some of those internal barriers, to me, that is a process that is ripe for change. And the agencies that are leading and that are going to be more successful with the technology part of that are the ones that are breaking down silos and are sharing information with each other and trusting, again, both within an agency and across agencies.
I'm a little surprised you went down that path of this idea of communication and training and better transparency internally versus this the path of, well, if we can automate more, if we could use more, again, existing technology instead of the new shiny technology. Do you get a sense that, again, whenever we talk about technology, it's never a technology problem, it's, for the most part, I think in many cases it's always the people problem. Are you seeing those silos being broken down? Are agencies, because of the cyber attacks and because of what happened during the pandemic, where resiliency, going back to the key word here, of the supply chain, of the people, of the infrastructure, of the network, all really came to bear? Do you see that those barriers are being broken down, even slowly but surely?
Yeah, I do. And so just to clarify one point, I didn't mean to downplay the importance of those other capabilities like orchestration. And for us at Splunk, we're always reminding our customers, you have to have full observability across your environment. If you can't see it, you can't protect it. Those are not new themes, but there's a broader awareness now, I think, outside of just the IT shop, the finance, the acquisition, the HR, the strategy. All people in an organization are starting to have an awareness of how important it is to see across the environment, see the data and how it's flowing. So I didn't mean to downplay that. I just wanted to kind of focus on the people process.
I wasn't. Of course, you weren't downplaying that. I didn't mean to insinuate that either, because you're a technology company. So
Right.
for you to say our technology.
Yeah,
no. But I think what's key here, and I'll even kind of put a finer point on it, is it's the technology is available, it's usable, people can take advantage of it, but sometimes even to take advantage of it, you got to break down these barriers because, well, Juliana, that's my data. You can't look at my data. Well, aren't we on the same agency? Well, yeah, but you're in that office and I'm in this office and it's my data. So go ahead.
Yeah. So to your point, yes, I do see more of that opening. It's not perfect, and it's going to take a long time to change processes that have been in place for a long time in the government, but just exchanges like you have and all the events and the conferences and the summits where you have people on stage in a fireside chat or in a panel, and they're sharing, well, this is what I did at my agency with data, and this is what we recommend our other agency, partners do. Those were different conversations 5-10 years ago. And now it's like, it's not only okay to be sharing with others best practices and, here's where the pitfalls are to avoid, and here's where you should look for opportunity. It's not only okay, it's like, it's not cool if you don't do that. It's very obvious when there are certain, either with some exceptions, of course, some of the intelligence community, elements are not in this same category, but even they're out on the circuit sometimes too. So that sharing of, hey, we all have warts here. It's no secret that most agencies are operating with less than sufficient budgets, less than sufficient workforces. So if we can't fix that problem with getting more resources, then we better be more efficient operating as a government, because we are all on the same team and we live on the same earth and we see the same threats that aren't even really on the far horizon anymore, but they're literally in our backyard or in our back pocket. We better figure out a way to be more efficient and effective, learning from each other. And that's what I love seeing, because there are more and more leaders doing that than ever before.
That's the key piece. More and more leaders doing that. I think if you can get agencies to work closer together, to the leadership to say, yes, you not only should do this, you will do this. I think that's important. And then we can talk about the funding challenges of Congress and the like. But instead of boring people and going over the cow path, paving the cow path, let's talk a little about zero trust, because that's a key piece to cyber resiliency. We've seen a lot of the foundation of the pillars, the strategies, 7 pillars over DoD, 5 within civilian agencies. Agencies are moving down the path of this journey. What are you starting to see from agencies around zero trust? How are they laying that foundation to, again, be more cyber resilient?
Right. Well, because it's been not a new theme, as you talked about, people in technology and IT have been talking about this concept for a decade or more. Maybe it was called something else, now it's called zero trust. Not everybody loves it. But the idea is, you have a visibility. It's about the data, the data, and as it moves around an organization, who has the rights to look at it, who should have certain permissions, and everyone should be untrusted at first until you authenticate, and then you're able to, see different things with data. So the fact that it's about data itself, I think, is something that non-IT leaders and agencies used to push off to the side to, oh, that's for the technology people, that's for the CIO's office. However, timing is everything. And in today's world, we all rely on, base our lives on data in our own personal lives now in a way that people didn't do. Again, I keep using a decade ago, but I'm going to use that as my point of reference. So with your smartphone, with your, streaming applications, how your family watches TV and movies, from the pandemic with remote work and all of that, more people are now aware of, oh, that's how technology can help me. So that broader awareness of how people as human beings can use data in their lives has made it, I would say, a little bit easier for the folks who have been pounding the pavement about we've got to invest in technology to keep our systems secure, and that zero trust is part of that. It's an easier conversation today because more people understand what that means. Oh, I get it. Like I don't want someone to find my smartphone because then they can get into my banking app because I don't have multi-factor authentication. I would argue that a large number of people understand that language more today than they did before having a smartphone was, a commodity item. So back to agencies, that makes the conversation easier to have across parts of the organization, different verticals inside the organization and different business units. but we have to keep moving forward because all of that costs money. And to your point, you talked about, funding. I don't think most of us will expect that some huge windfall is going to come and there's going to be more money in the budgets to come, at least that outpace inflation and all of those things. So back to being more efficient, the more people can talk in normal people terms about why zero trust is important and why it matters to you, what's in it for you, the more successful they'll be. And that is going to get easier with time, because like I said, people understand that how important that data piece is because it matters to us in our personal lives.
That's always been the key to any new initiative, any new cyber initiative, specifically what's in it for you? Why does this matter to you? And I think with all the recent cyber attacks, all the recent efforts to people have seen whether there's their personal data or their professional data, I think that conversation is getting easier. At the same time, I think it's incumbent on vendors like Splunk, but as well as chief information officers and chief information security officers to really drill down and bring, if this happens, this is what the impact to the mission will be. This is why we're adding phishing resistant multi-factor authentication, not just SMS code text to your phone. How is that starting to happen? Because that again leads the path of resilience.
Right. Well, what I'm proud of that we do at Splunk, I see other companies do this too, is whenever there's a big, huge event, there's a SolarWinds or there's a something like that, we are responding very quickly, not just with, oh my gosh, the sky is falling or the sky has already fallen and it's doomsday, but here's what to do about it right now. Here's where, and that is technical, that is, here's what your analysts should be doing. Here are the, here are the key indicators that they should be looking for in the cyber, but it is an almost immediate response with, we are here to help you. And do these 5 things right now. And you're more likely to avoid, long-term problems from this big event. It's not 100%. Some people will have already experienced an attack and they're coming from behind the 8 ball and they've got other problems. But the vast majority of organizations are in a position of taking the first, they're being offensive instead of defensive. So I've seen that more and more where companies we are offering support right now today. Go to this team at Splunk, we call it Surge. We have a Surge team. Other companies do it too. And again, back to things that have changed in the last 10 years, giving stuff away for free is not generally what a lot of companies are inclined to do. But in this case, it helps everybody. It's the right thing to do. It helps. And it moves the ball down the field faster for us to get in and talk with agencies about, okay, now you you lived through that potential crisis, but let's help you position yourselves to be more resilient for the next time, because there will be a next time. And I think there have been so many next times. Again, now it's an easier conversation to have than yeah, well, we were lucky the last 5 times, but let's get this right, moving forward.
I was having a conversation just the other day with a federal employee who works at CISA. And I said, it feels like agencies are in a much better shape today than they were, again, 10, 12, 15 years ago. We don't hear, when we hear about a big cybersecurity threat, a vulnerability, it doesn't seem to impact agencies as it once did. I remember Heartbleed. I remember the Love virus. You probably remember those too, as big events. And now as we see even SolarWinds, yeah, it affected some agencies, but it was not across the board. Do you think this comes back to better data visibility, better monitoring? Are agencies getting better and still, again, as a part of their resilience, understanding, you mentioned we all rely on data, but there's another piece to this, which is using that data to drive decisions and to drive better security?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why. There also might be a sensitivity factor, especially as Americans, we're pretty fickle. And so we stop thinking something is important when we hear about it all the time. So I think there's an element of that. But for purposes of this conversation, absolutely agencies are further ahead. And especially the ones that have migrated a lot or all of their environment into cloud environments. It's a lot of the security concerns that existed around commercial cloud solutions years ago, most of those shouldn't be concerns anymore, or at least to the extent that they were. Nothing's perfect. No environment is perfect. But because agencies have been chipping away at modernizing, stopping the spend of money against legacy technology and legacy processes that are just a black hole and a pit of, money going into the pit and not getting any return on that investment, if you will. So many more agencies have turned the corner and have decided to make the investment and to continue to fund the technology enhancements that they need. And so that it's showing, like, those investments over time are showing in the resilience of, they can come back from a big attack, or come back and be a little less damaged than they maybe would have been if they had maintained their legacy infrastructure. So absolutely, there's been a lot of progress, and more agencies are getting on board.
I know there's a lot of frustration across government and within industry that more progress and more accelerate that progress. And, as you know, we talked a lot about resiliency. We talked about people, process, technology. When we talk about more broadly about resiliency, are there things that IT leaders should start thinking about? Are there things that they can do today to prioritize and continue to move down the resilience chart, if you will?
Yes. So aside from continue to make investments in modern technology and modernize your infrastructure, that's one thing. But in the meantime, educating the workforce and getting everyone to be a partner in your effort to build resilience is absolutely critical. We have to get past the days of, that's not my job, the IT people will take care of it. There is free training. There are certifications you can get online that are for free. For federal government employees, there are universities that exist in and around the DC area to provide education for federal workers. And it's up to leaders to realize that's for anyone in the organization, everyone in the organization. And I've used this example before, but it remains relevant, and that's this notion of electricity. And at the turn of the century, when everybody was getting electricity in their homes and businesses, people didn't really understand it. But today we all know, even though you're not an electrician or an electrical engineer, we all know the dangers of sticking your finger in the plug, because we know it'll hurt us, because we've been indoctrinated from when we were young to be careful with electricity. We are at that point where every single person needs to understand the power and the risks of having their hands on those keyboards and having access to data, and having now with the proliferation of generative AI, I said it, there's just more and more coming faster and faster, and adversaries are going to progress faster than we can even keep up, really. So the sooner that leaders take advantage of this opportunity where people are paying attention to data and AI and things like that, and educate more people, the faster they'll be able to provide real resilience for their agency. Because it's not just at the keyboard, it's at home, it's in people's minds, it's how they talk with each other. So I can't emphasize it enough, is that education and upskilling piece is absolutely critical and should be a top priority for leaders everywhere.
Juliana, in the last couple minutes we have together for this session of the Cyber Leaders Exchange, you mentioned generative AI, but more specifically, you mentioned the threats that are coming faster, adversaries making more progress, and we can keep up. So what do? We can't just give up. We can't just throw our hands to the air and say, I'm going to unplug all my computers and just go back to paper. What can agencies do to kind of deal with this advanced threats?
Okay, so what they can do is take advantage of the technology that they already have in their environment. And this is another thing I see across agencies. Most do not. Most don't even know what technology is in their environment or in their stack, and often haven't turn on the features that can protect them from a lot of the threats that are coming in. This is where the actual partnership with the agency and your industry team, the people who work at the companies for the tools that you have a conversation with them about, how can I get more value out of this investment we've already made? We spend a lot of time trying to get customers to have that conversation with us, and all we want is for them to get more value. And that's where they should start, is let's see how much more juice we can get for the squeeze of what we have, while we figure out how we're going to make other changes around the organization.
And real quick, let me just jump in. And most of the time, it's not necessarily going to cost them more money because they already own the tool or have the subscription.
Yes.
Let's be clear on that. I mean, maybe there are cases where there's an upsell, but generally speaking, this is not a, you all are saying you're only using 10% of the tool's functionality. You have the full 100%, get to 80%. Is that right?
I'm going to use the smartphone example again, and that is how many of us actually use all of the capability that our smartphone gives us. We spend a whole lot of money on this device and we use like 2 things, and shame on us for not getting more value out of our investment. And that's what I mean by, getting more value for what they've already spent.
And I think part of that, as you said, is conversations, understanding, and seeing where things can happen. I think too often what we see is agencies want to buy a new tool instead of saying, do I already own a tool that can do this or do 80% of this or whatever the need is? When you have those conversations, does the aha moment go off sometimes, or are they still looking for the shiny object?
Most often it's the, oh my gosh, I didn't even know it could do that. Oh, really? We already have that? That's the majority of the time.
Well, I think agencies, as money gets tighter, as the budget gets to shrink a little bit, and we know agencies are facing tighter budgets for 2024 and potentially 2025, those conversations will become more valuable.
Yes.
Juliana, unfortunately, we're out of time for this session of the Cyber Leaders Exchange. I always enjoy catching up with you. So let me thank my guest. Juliana Vida is the Group Vice President and Chief Strategy Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more from the Cyber Leaders Exchange.